Thank you, Evan. I'm painfully aware of the fact that I'm standing between all of you and coffee, so I'm going to try to keep it within the bounds. And also, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back compared to some of the talks this morning that have been very interesting, but technical, nerding out about certain features. I have a little special place in my heart for the plasmid talk because I did my PhD on plasmids way back in the day. 15 years ago, so, more than that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about the community. We're going to change things up a little bit compared to in previous summits. Community updates tended to be about updates to the language, to features, etc., coming in from the community. Here, because a lot of people here, I think, are a little bit newer to the Nextflow ecosystem, I'm going to make it a little bit more about the community itself. And introduce some of these things like NF Core that we just take in stride. Assume everybody knows what NF Core is. We're going to talk a little bit about what all of that is, how that all fits together. And I'm actually going to tie into some of the things that Evan foreshadowed in his talk, and I'm going to pretend that was totally on purpose and coordinated. That was a happy surprise. All right, so to start with, I want to talk a little bit about why community matters. And because if you think about it, everything we're doing is aimed at empowering the scientific work that the research community is doing, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to empower researchers to do more, better science. And so one of the things that I'm interested in from the community point of view, so I run the community team at Seqera. We're a very small team, and our job is to basically support all of that. We want to know, like, Seqera is building these amazing tools where we've got things coming in from the community. There's a lot of collaboration. How do we know if it's working, if what we're doing is actually helping people do their science, get it done more quickly, more easily, etc.? And so that's what we're going to be looking at now. I could give you, like some people do, a bunch of numbers that are really impressive. They're very cool, big numbers about the number of downloads and the number of people contributing codes and line of codes and all of that. And those numbers are very cool. The trend lines are all going up. And that is a very good sign. But to me, it's not as satisfying to look at those numbers just from the raw point of view. I want to look at what's behind that. And actually, one graph that I want to show you that I think is kind of the next layer of interesting is actually the figure from the preprints that Evan talked about in his talk this morning, which is the data behind that 33% figure of proportion of people, citations to Nextflow as opposed to other workflow managers. Because what this figure does is that it puts the usage information in the context of what people are doing proportionally. And it tells us, compared to other workflow systems, Nextflow is actually gaining, expanding faster comparatively. And that tells us the uptick, those rising trends. It's not just the rising tide raises all boats. It's actually something about Nextflow makes it get adopted at a higher rate in the community. So that's a really good sign. And it also tells us that people are getting work done. They're not just using it, they're actually completing projects, they're publishing results. Now this is a bit of a lagging indicator, but it's a really good sign that people can effectively use the tools to get the work done. So that's very cool. We also see, like you notice if you pay attention to what's happening in the ecosystem, you realize that a lot of the job postings for bioinformatics jobs that you're seeing now have Nextflow as a job requirement. Sometimes it's a nice to have. We're increasingly seeing it be a requirement. So that's also a pretty important sign that Nextflow is becoming like part of that foundational toolkit for bioinformaticians. Now, I have to disclose at this point that until 6 months ago-ish, I was working at the Broad Institute. I wasn't 6 months ago, but before that, I was at Broad, and my go-to language of choice, I'm going to get in trouble here. My go-to language of choice was workflow description language, WDL, WDL. And it was really interesting to me. For many years, I've kind of tracked the development of Nextflow because it was very clear that Nextflow was hitting rates of adoption that were much higher than what we were seeing for WDL. It's like, what's different about them? From a technical point of view, there's a lot of similarities. There's some important differences. And I'm not here to dunk on WDL, by the way, because I think it's still solid. It does some important things very well. But if you look at both languages and other languages that are available, and you look at what's different, it's really the impact of the community has an outsized effect. And Evan kind of teased that earlier. I want to look at that in more detail. What do we mean when we talk about community? A lot of people, when we're talking about community in the context of software, are actually talking about your user base. If you have a lot of people who are going to your websites, downloading your software and using it, that's not a community, that's a user base. And it's good to have a big user base. It's a good sign, all of that, good for business. But it's not the same thing as a community. When we're talking about a community is the people, and people interacting specifically. People who are interacting, people who are collaborating and sharing, they're helping each other. And they go further because they're going together, all right? And a lot of the time, they have fun along the way. And I have to say that at this point, for anybody who's joined us just today, some of us have already spent 2 days together in hackathon and training, obviously working very hard. Or possibly this might be the slide that's a little more convincing on the we've been working hard part. So we had 2 tracks running in parallel for the past 2 days, which is why I'm looking a little frazzled. Sorry about that. You've caught me midway already through the event. Training for newcomers on one hand, and that was taught by Chris and I, Chris who has been handling the transitions. So we taught the training, and then on the other track we had the NF Core Hackathon, which was led primarily by Marcel and Maxime. Nobody has last names because once you get used to the Nextflow community, these become household names like Beyonce, Chris Marcel. Okay, and so I want to talk a little bit more about NF Core Hackathon and NF Core specifically because we throw that word around a lot, but if you're new, you might not realize all of the context and what that means and the importance that it plays in the Nextflow ecosystem. So if you're not already familiar with it, it's a community project that was started in 2018. I'm sure if I make any mistake in recounting the history, somebody will yell out, and that is okay. So it was started by a handful of workflow enthusiasts, spearheaded by Phil Ewells, whose last name I always mispronounce, so I should just say Phil. He was my predecessor running the community team at Seqera. I stole his job. He's not here today, and he's having terrible FOMO. I believe he's watching us on our internal stream. Sorry, Phil. He's now our project manager for open source at Seqera. And he and his collaborators at the time at Sci-Fi Lab in Sweden had this fantastic idea because they were, like many of us have at some point, struggling with the problem of needing to exchange code, share code with collaborators, trying to get analyses to be reproducible, portable across different infrastructures and so on. And they had the fantastic idea of just getting together and nailing down some best practices for developing and structuring workflows using Nextflow. And they started this project, and long story short, it has just snowballed into this massive community, true community, that provides many important resources that are critical to the work of so many people in the Nextflow community. I'll run through a few of these things. Part of this is just the pipelines themselves. At this point, there's over 100 different pipelines that cover a variety of use cases in bioinformatics, plus an expanding number that cover completely different scientific domains. And there are pipelines that anyone could pretty much use out of the box. They're community curated, they're developed by experts, like scientific experts in those fields. They're developed collaboratively using best practices, so they have a certain structure and layouts, they have testing, they have all sorts of features that make them really robust and reliable. So in itself, that is already a hugely valuable resource, and it's a resource that continues to expand as more volunteers and enthusiasts and experts kind of join the project. It just continues to grow, and it's a fantastic resource for the whole ecosystem. And as I've mentioned, that's starting to expand beyond bioinformatics, which is really cool. A quick note related to this is that the NF Core project has recently launched an initiative to form special interest groups, or SIGs, S-I-Gs, and that the idea is to help people find collaborators, find each other based on their domain of interests. Up till now, it's been very pipeline-centric. The special interest groups will allow people to find each other based on the wider domain of interests, not just a specific pipeline. And you can read more about that on the NF Core blog. There's a bite-sized video on YouTube. If you Google Nextflow NF Core SIGs, you'll find it. Or ask me and I'll shoot you a link. Okay. In addition to the pipelines, there's also a bunch of additional resources, like also workflow-related code, like sub-workflows and modules, but also tooling for linting, for dealing with schemas, for dealing with a lot of the process of developing and maintaining workflows. So that in itself is really valuable too. And it's valuable whether you're an end user, you just want to use existing pipelines, whether you're a developer, you're part of a core facility that wants to run workflows in production with needs like auditing and all of that. All of those needs are taken into account by the project. So, this is obviously a very important project, and what's kind of amazing is that it's entirely fueled by volunteers. Like, this is just volunteers out in the community who, either as part of their job or just their hobby time, are contributing to this massive effort. It's all free, it's all open source, and it's really robust. And that is really a triumph of open source philosophy, if you think about it. And part of how it works is because there has been a community of people that has been nucleated, and people who are collaborating, working with each other online, on Slack, through GitHub, and occasionally meet up in person for these hackathons. And the hackathons themselves tend to be kind of the opportunity to have a burst of progress and productivity, because you have really dedicated time for a couple of days to just focus and get those PRs out and merged. But it's also a great opportunity to socialize and strengthen the connections at the human level, and that has really played a very important role in the shaping of this community, and I think in its success. Speaking of hackathons, I want to plug the fact that there's some upcoming events. The one that's on the website is obviously a little bit removed from us, but we do have one coming up in Barcelona in October. I want to signal, it might not be easy for everyone to travel to Barcelona, but this is part of the plan to have alternating events, summits in Boston and Barcelona, Barcelona in October, May in Boston, which is obviously the best pairing in terms of weather and location. And the idea there really is to start making it easier for people to come to these kinds of events, because the human interaction and the connection is really important for the development of the community. And we'd like to make it easier for that to flourish. Speaking of locations and travel and geographies, I made a little map showing Nextflow users by country. There's various ways to measure this, but this is based on what I call social signal, meaning people showing up on Slack, web visits, and so on. Obviously, this is what the distribution looks like. But this is a little bit misleading if you just take it at face value. It looks like the US has just a huge amount of people, and much more than anywhere else. Obviously, it's all relative. If you adjust that per capita, you get some really interesting observations. First, check out Sweden. Like, they have cornered the market on Nextflow. And obviously, this is not an accident. Sweden is the birthplace of NF Core. And if we look everywhere else, it really tracks the density of Nextflow usage tracks really well with the amount of engagement with NF Core. So that really shows the strong parallel, the strong relationship that we have there. And so, from this point, you see that there's obviously a lot of density in the European countries, and there's historical reasons, right, for why it all started there and has expanded out since. There's a lot of use elsewhere in the world. There's a lot in North America, but it's pretty clear that comparatively, there's still a lot to be done in terms of developing the community to turn. Right now, in North America, it's a little bit more user-based than a community. And one of the things we'd really like to do is see what we can do to strengthen the community aspect, bring people together, because we know that people are more successful and are able to go further in their work when they're in community with other people who are facing the same problems, and working towards common goals. So, okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the kinds of things that we are doing from the Seqera side to support the community and keep driving that development of community engagement to help make sure that people who are using the Nextflow are not just isolated users, but they find a community that helps them be successful. So from our side, the main program that we have running right now that was launched at the summit in Barcelona in October and officially began in January, which is led by my colleague Marcel, who is over there in the back. Marcel has been leading the Ambassadors program, and basically the idea of this program is to support people who are motivated individuals who, for the most part, are already out there talking about Nextflow, maybe running trainings, helping people on board, etc., talking about it at conferences. And we want to support them by giving them travel grants or funding for organizing local meetups. We'll fund some pizza and drinks or something like that, so that people can get together in their local community. And so we've got a first cohort of ambassadors that has been working on this since January and have been producing blogs, organizing events, hosting local sites for the NF Core Hackathon and things like that. We have an open call that's been running for the past few months, and it's going to close June 14. We are very keen to get some more ambassadors in this kind of second round now that we've got, the program is running, we've got some process in place to make things nice and streamlined. We'd love to take on some additional people, especially in North America. We don't have a lot of representation right now. We'd love to get some motivated people from the community to help us kind of nucleate more of this engagement throughout the US and Canada. So if you're interested, if you love to talk about Nextflow, if you just never shut up about it, then we definitely want to talk to you. Come see us, me, Marcel, Chris, or apply online. We can chat about what it means to be a Nextflow ambassador. We'd love to get you in for this cohort. Okay, so that's my pitch. All right, moving on. Oh, wait, no, I have an example. A great example of something that just this is just one recent example. Kubra, who is originally from Turkey, who is in Germany, and organized recently they were calling it a watch party, which I think is fantastic. So our team regularly runs, semi-regularly, runs community training events where we'll run through training materials online, and people can tune in and watch and ask questions on Slack. By default, it's something that you do just by yourself at your computer. And Kubra and Florian, who recently joined us at Seqera, had this great idea of organizing a local day to bring people at their institution together to run through the training together. So instead of being isolated at their computer, they would be, just in a room together and suffer through the process as a group instead of being by themselves. There's no suffering involved, I promise you. But, when you're new to this kind of thing, it can be a little hard. And the idea there is to make it just more enjoyable by doing it together. And so they did that in, I want to say March, April, I don't know, time is an illusion. They did that. They basically organized this local meetup. They worked through the training together, and they had a really good experience doing that. So they wrote up a blog post about it, and they plan to do that again in the future. And that is a really great example. I hope I mentioned Kubra is one of our ambassadors. If I didn't, there you go. That's a great example of something that the ambassadors do. And I put a photo up to show that it's not a very big group. It doesn't entail organizing like 50 or 100-person events. Just even like 10, 15 people together. That's a great way to get a small group together, to nucleate, and that will grow over time. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. All right. Moving on to our second major community engagement initiative that we're starting this year, which is led by Chris. The idea here, we're calling it institutional outreach to kind of contrast it to the ambassadors program, which is very much working with individuals. This program, the goal is to work with core facilities and educators at teaching institutions and research institutions whose job typically entails supporting some local community of researchers, some number of labs doing computational work, something like that. And typically, they have to deal with people coming in and asking for training, asking for support, asking for troubleshooting, and stuff like that. And you have all over the world core staff people who end up having to develop their own training materials, their own site. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of duplicative work. And so this program aims to cut down some of that duplication of efforts by finding out what would be helpful for them, and then we go and develop some of these materials so that we can equip them. Maybe we help them train some trainers, help them organize training sessions, things like that. And so that's still in a pilot phase. We've been in touch with people at core facilities to try to figure out what are their major pain points, what can we do to help them. And based on that, we identified some early needs. We've developed some new training programs, training materials that we've been trialing. The training track that we ran Tuesday and Wednesday was our first full-scale run-through of the new materials that we made. Thank you, everyone who came to the trainings, for being patient as we iron out some of the minor kinks in the process. But that's how we're going to get to a better place in terms of having better training materials for everyone, because these materials will be on the training portal, training.nextflow.io. But it's also something that we want to specifically work with core facilities to equip them with the materials they need to support their local constituencies. And then finally, the third kind of initiative that we started this year is called the Seqera Cloud Academic Program, and that is something where we're providing free pro-level access to Seqera platform, which it was formerly known as Tower. So the idea is for any academics, researchers at qualifying academic institutions, which are teaching institutions that award degrees and do not run any commercial workloads. We can give them free pro-level access to the platform so that they can do their work without needing to worry about licenses and stuff like that. So if you are at such an institution and you're interested, please feel free to come to talk to me during the coffee break. It's a very simple and painless process, and we can get you set up very quickly. And the idea there is to just make the access to these kinds of tools more widely available to people who wouldn't typically be commercial customers anyway. And the reason there is, in a lot of places, we want to get beyond just helping bioinformaticians who code. There are a lot of people who need to be able to run pipelines for their work, but they're not going to be the ones necessarily writing the pipelines in the first place, and they're often not very comfortable working at the command line. So by having these interfaces available to them, we're hoping that that'll enable them to get their work done, which again, it all comes back to this goal where our goal is to enable researchers to get their work done more easily and more reproducibly. Anyone in the academic program will get their support from through the community forum. The community forum is new as of last summit, and is increasingly the place, this applies to everyone, it's increasingly the place where we'll be dealing with the community sides, Q&A. If you have problems with Nextflow, if you need to ask a question, please come here instead of Slack, because the answers will be visible to everyone. More readily, they're searchable, all of that. There's a lot of advantages. So we are migrating as much as possible Q&A to the forum. Please join us there. You can still go to Slack to have those impromptu conversations and DMs and all of that are very helpful. But for Q&A and all of that, like support style questions, please come to the forum. And that's all I wanted to cover from the community sides today. There's so much more that's happened in the community and things, really cool things that people have done that I don't have time to talk about today. What I'd love to see is next summit, everybody who's been doing work apply to, put in an abstract and come up here and talk about it too, because we'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much for your attention. Welcome to the community for those of you who are new, and I hope you have a great time. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Gigi. We have more comments rather than questions on that. I think there's some murmurings around going to West Coast in terms of that. So hopefully that's something we can pull up over the next couple of years as it relates to.
Yes, we are especially, yes, and I have two things. Thank you for prompting me. We are, for the ambassador program, where I mentioned we're very keen to get more ambassadors in the North America, especially on the West Coast. It's a big continent, it's far away. And the second thing is that I am hiring. I have a position open on the community team, hiring developer advocates, which is basically outreach and community support and all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, especially if you're usually on the West Coast, please come talk to me. Or if you have a friend who's on the West Coast who would be a great developer advocate and loves to talk about community and supporting people and enabling people to live their best lives, please send them my way. Thank you.
Okay, awesome, thanks a lot. And finally, Phil says congratulations on the name pronunciation. Thank you. Awesome, let's go have coffee. Round of applause for all the speakers this morning. Thanks so much.